back to the Delta Flyers. This is something where we've had so much to talk about. We're going to have to split this episode.
This is supersized
podcast.
All right, we're going to continue talking about the pilot, a recap, and where were we?
So now we're in the mess hall scene. This is the actual very first scene that was filmed. I was super nervous. And I remember in this scene, I'm sitting with the actors Scott Jake and Jeff McCarthy, who played the original Doctor and the original First Officer. They're sitting with me at a table while we're eating. And Tom Paris comes in, and he orders from the replicator, he orders soup.
That was the first scene we ever shot?
That is it. That was the first one.
The very first shot we ever did was me walking up to that replicator.
Yeah.
Saying that tomato soup stuff. And then as I turned and over to you guys, the camera panned over to reveal you.
Correct.
Talking crap about me and giving me the stink eye.
Correct.
And I remember that we had a Starfield outside of the mess hall.
Yeah.
They kept talking about the Starfield. I didn't know what they were talking about. And they had built this moving Starfield, like it was on motors, so it would move and make it look like the ship was moving.
That's right.
Things like that. And so there was all this conversation about that, and I didn't know what they were talking about. Years later, of course, I realized very well what the different Starfields are. When we're at Impulse or Warp is a green screen because it's got to be stars flying by. Impulse is just the track stars. And then if we're docked like we were, I think there at that point, stars were just still. So we just had a still Starfield. I remember all that stuff was very, very new. And I remember the crew was talking a lot about, this was the old, they basically repurposed the TNG. Yeah.
10 forward. That was their little 10 forward set. And for me, Billy Peets, head electrician? What do you call it? What was the grip? Head of grip. I thought he was a mute because that day all he did was nod. He didn't ever shake his head, either shook his head or he nodded. He didn't say anything. So I thought that he did not have the capability to speak at all. That's the funny
Billy
thing.
Billy Peets was actually the gaffer, not the key grip.
He's the gaffer.
Randy Burgess was the key grip.
What's really remarkable about this scene, or what stands out, is that, again, I was so nervous that my body was shaking. Like my entire body was shaking. And again, I was thinking, I need to tell the executive producer I can't do this. I need to quit. I can't do this job. I was just shaking. And I looked at the two guys that were the guest stars the first officer who passes away and the doctor that passed away. So Jeff and Scott were sitting there, and I look at Jeff and I said, Jeff, man, I think I'm going to pee my pants. I said, I'm so nervous right now. I can't stop shaking. He's like, yeah, man, I can see it. And I said, what do I do? He says, hey, let's do an improv exercise. I'm going to get your mind off of this. Okay. So I said, well, what kind of exercise? He goes, just go with it. Go with the flow. And so as Robbie walks in, in a very low voice to me, he says, there he is, that bastard Tom Paris. I said, what? Why is he a bastard? Because we know he's a bastard. I said, how do you know he's a bastard? He said, because we know everything about him. That's why.
You were whispering all this stuff.
You were whispering all this while you were walking. Yes.
While I was doing my tomato soup line?
Yeah, brother. You're far enough away. You didn't hear it. And it worked. And it worked, dude. It worked. It saved my butt. Because literally, I said, well, how do you know he's such a bad guy? He says, well, we know him so well. We're going to know what he orders from the replicator. And so then that made me laugh a little bit, right? Because I said, really? You're going to know what he's going to order? Yeah, he's going to order soup. And then you say, tomato soup. And then he goes, and guess what? This is how we know he's a bad guy, that he's trouble. He's going to be picky. He's not going to just want tomato soup. And then the replicator asks you, there are 15 varieties of soup like that. And you were like, plain, hot, plain tomato soup. And so the whole time they're actually, prompting before you say that, he's going to order plain soup and he's going to want it hot. See how picky he is? We know him so well. And the whole time I'm now laughing and getting into this. All my shaking stopped. It came over to me. And then I have the immortal words, and you're like, well, I guess we can't be friends. And I'm like, well, I get to choose my own friends. And then we become buddies for the rest of the show. So
yeah, Jeff is a very talented actor. He was played the Beast on Broadway in Beauty and the Beast, and done a lot of big theater projects. Good guest stars on the show. Always have good guest stars.
My eternal thanks to Mr. McCarthy for helping me out and getting me less nervous. From here, we head on into the bridge scene. where we were heading into the Badlands. Paris and Kim are called to the bridge, and we see the displacement wave that takes the Maquis ship to the Delta Quadrant is now also coming bearing down upon us. This is the first time you see Janeway's wig, and Janeway's wig changes throughout this series, because after the displacement wave knocks us out,
that piece hanging down,
it's all over the place, right?
It's everywhere. She had that piece, and then finally, when she's heading to engineering, you see her. She actually didn't put it up. They just had her hands up as if she was doing it to suggest that she fixed her hair finally. But
they had to go back and reshoot that corridor scene. That wasn't in there, because they had shot the scene of her walking into engineering and her hair was perfectly fine. And somebody said, wait a minute, continuity-wise, that's wrong. Her hair was totally down from the bridge, and now it's perfect. So then she puts it back up into a bun, and it's a looser bun in the hallway. When she walks into engineering, it's a super tight bun. So it's off, right? Oh, my God.
I remember now that you say that.
And the crazy thing is, as you watch the progression of her wig, like some of it, you can see the lace, the color is weird. At the end, when she gives the big speech about, we're far away from home, blah, 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 the wig looks a lot better. Like they finally the hair team got it all together. Yep. But it was nutty that they had to shoot that corridor scene just to make it look like she put the hair back.
I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we go to Tom and Harry are in the sick bay. The part of the sick bay is on fire. They handed me that fire extinguisher, which Megan and Keely were like looking at, like, well, that's not very futuristic, because it really looked like a very basic kind of thing. And I remember putting these gloves on, because it was like that super cold liquid nitrogen or whatever it is, right? There was pyrotechnics going on. That was the first time I felt sparks hitting my face, and that happened to all of us all the time. Yeah, I found it interesting that our head of pyro was Dick Brownfield, who literally had 2 fingers missing. So it was like he had blown his fingers off at something.
I think that most of the special effects guys I worked with in my life, missing at least one finger. He's an old school, special effects guy. Yeah. I also remember in the sick bay that Bob Picardo, that was my first taste of him and props. He loved props, so he had pads or things. He loved business. And I remember noticing that he came in and wanted to have props to play with and move around, and that continued through the whole series. But I remember noticing that right out of the gate, that Bob, this guy likes to work with props.
Which is good. It's good business to have business as an actor.
Absolutely.
But I will say, since I am the person to activate the EMH, am I the father of the Doctor in a way? Does Bob Picardo he owes his entire life to Ensign Harry Kim. I bring him to life. So, that was my note there. So then we go back to engineering, back to sick bay, back to engineering. People start disappearing. Sick bay, they're disappearing in sick bay and engineering. And we end up in the farm scene, the farm set, which we talked about earlier, a city of industry, very odd in the midst of an industrial area is this kind of rural set, right? We have the banjo player, we have Tom's flirtation.
Banjo player, he couldn't, I remember filming that, he could not play banjo at all.
Oh, really?
Huh. No, he did not really play. That was all put in later. And I remember when I was watching him, his fingers would just be kind of randomly doing things. And I was like, that doesn't look real. Like, I know they're going to put music in, but it just doesn't look like he's actually playing a banjo.
So anybody who plays guitar is probably watching like that. That's not right. That's not a chord.
Not a real banjo playing.
Yeah.
And then there was that farm girl that was all flirty with you and me.
Right. And you were extra flirty with her. She was kind of,
Oh, I thought that was my character back then.
That's right.
He was the ladies' man. He thought
you were the bad boy.
Himself as the ladies' man. Yeah. Very distracted by the pretty girls.
She was nice.
Just remember that Robert Beltran for 7 straight years would always quote, "Oh, well, we're ahead of schedule." Or
no more time.
Not enough time.
Yeah.
He'd always do he did that for 7 straight years whenever we were, running out of time, behind schedule on shooting, filming or something.
Beltran did that?
Yeah, Beltran would always.
I don't remember that. Yeah. I do recall his when he calls Janeway when she's, well, aren't you uppity for a minor bipedal species? That line, minor bipedal species, was funny. after we get back to the ship, we realize that, guess what? Harry Kim's not there. And the Maquis also realized B'Elanna Torres is not there. And you are the one that messages the captain saying, Captain, Harry's gone. And you show that you have care and compassion for Harry.
Yeah, they were, the writers really put a lot of stuff into that pilot episode to establish that Harry and Tom, are bonded from that scene in Quark's bar, and they're going to look out for each other, and they're going to be buddies, and that was very well conceived by the writers. I think
it was at this point that little Keeley said, "He doesn't care about you. Tom never did care about you." That was her line.
Really?
She just said that as a joke. Oh, and we do also remember before coming back on the ship, that's when the townspeople turn evil, and we see the processing facility, and we see everybody on the bio beds. Right. Yeah. That was the infamous.
I didn't remember. I remembered you having a needle and screaming really loudly.
Yes, you didn't. That. See, the thing is,
but I had a needle.
You did. You had coverage, but they didn't use your coverage. When they did your close-up, I watched, and I remember when Janeway did hers, she made this sound. She's like, I mean, and I joke when I'm at conventions that it didn't sound painful. It sounded like she was having something else happening to her body. And then when it came to you, you did this. You were like, like you were constipated or something. It was sort of this like macho, hey, I'm still Han Solo, tough guy thing. You made this sort of grunting thing. Tuvok made no noise. And as a preparation as an actor before that scene, I said, okay, 3-foot needle gets inserted into my chest cavity. How am I going to react? And I said, well, let's go with the obvious. Let's go with the choice that there is no anesthetics, that it's just going to be painful. And so I chose to scream. And that was, how they ended that act. It was sort of like, I went to commercial break. So I screamed my bloody head off. And
you did. I remember that.
Yeah. After that scene, we had people on chat groups. I was in Star Trek chat groups on AOL back in the day, and people were like, wow, you're just like Chekhov. You scream real good. So people were happy about my screaming. This was also the first day that we realized that Tuvok was a practical joker, Tim Russ. If you recall, he was wearing a robe like all of us on set, and the men were basically shirtless, and we had skin-colored tights that we wore to look like we were nude. Women wore all complete body-colored tights that came all the way up. Mm-hmm. And we were in robes before we shot our close-up, and Tim Russ made the announcement there. He turns to everybody and says, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I have a quick announcement to make. I just want to say that when I take my robe off, could everyone please be polite and not make any comments or laugh? And now we're thinking, what's underneath that robe? What's he hiding? Does he have leprosy? Does he have boils? What is it? So he makes this huge announcement on set to cast and crew, and he takes off his robe. And at that point, half the room starts laughing their ass off. And I'm thinking, what are they laughing at? And he slowly turns, like in a 360 turn. And as he turns profile to me, where I can see him in profile, I notice that he stuffed about 50 pairs of socks in his crotch area to make it look like he has this huge elephantitis of the penis, basically. It was just massive crotch. And everyone started cracking up, because who knew that the Vulcan would be like that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he literally is
very funny. Tim always had he would prepare these jokes, things like that, and he was always very dry. And we had a good group. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a fun group. So then we go back to the bridge, and then we head to the alien sickbay, where you meet Kim and Torres that are now sequestered in the alien sickbay. And the infection they had on us was sort of, they had these little. Honestly, it looked like apple pie is what it looked like. And I kept that, the one that was on my hand. I kept
it. Really?
No. I did, and I glued it onto the mirror in my trailer. I just had it sticking there, so I don't know why I did that. I just thought, hey, I'm going to collect it.
After we wrapped?
I kept it after we wrapped. It was just kind of stuck on my trailer mirror for a while. And then later, in a later episode where Species 8472 attacks me and I have the tendrils coming out, I kept one tendril and I posted it right next to that little apple pie disease infection kind of thingy. Nice. So those, that was a fun scene. Megan made fun of the fact when I restrained B'Elanna that I'm holding her with my fingers outstretched. Like I don't grab her shoulders. She kind of gets angry and she hits the door. I'm like, what are you doing? And I grab her like that. And Megan's like, why would you grab somebody like that? And part of it was because I didn't want to screw up the makeup that was on my back of my hand, because it was kind of precariously put on, right? And so I didn't want to move and make too much movement, and so it kind of looked a little awkward. But that's one of the reasons. And you can see that she actually tore. There's a hole in her gown.
I noticed that one on the rewatch. Roxanne had been a dancer, and she was very committed to anything physical. Whenever there was, stunts or things like that, Roxanne was very committed to it, and really definitely dove in.
The next scene, we're in Janeway's ready room, and she's talking with Tuvok, and she's talking about how Kim's mother called and said that Harry left his clarinet. I have a friend of mine, Aaron, who mentions that this is the whole reason, why you were never promoted, is because Janeway was so annoyed that your mom called to talk about your missing clarinet.
She said, I remember when on the rewatch that she said Harry went to Juilliard or something and played the clarinet.
I think she said wasn't it the Starfleet Youth Symphony she mentioned? Did she say Juilliard?
She said Juilliard, Juilliard Youth Symphony or something like that.
Okay.
Which I had forgotten, but I was like, because I actually did go to Juilliard.
You did go there.
Acting program. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. At the end of that shot, it's weird. It's a 2-shot of Janeway talking to Tuvok, and because he's standing on a lower part of that ready room, he looks like he's a foot shorter than Janeway. And so people don't know, if they're watching Voyager for the first time, they don't know the physicality of that set, exactly what it is. But it was a different level. But honestly, Tuvok looked tiny compared to her. So then we go back to the bridge where we meet Neelix. Neelix comes on the screen for the first time.
Neelix in his super cool coat. I love that coat. I thought his look was awesome in his ship. I wish he had kept that look. It was awesome.
I wonder who has that coat. I know they auctioned off all of our uniforms and everything and costumes at the end of the show. So somebody, some fan somewhere owns
that. It's a cool coat.
I love that coat. And I just thought it's odd that he's in a ship, yet he has no clue about transporter technology. So it's like, what? Because we beam him over and he's like, beam? He doesn't understand that.
It's so funny. And he sort of got this pose like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. I'm ready.
So funny. I thought it was a breath of fresh air to see some of that comedy that Neelix brought.
Definitely. And there was a lot of scenes with Neelix that ended up on the cutting room floor that people didn't see. There was a scene in his ship where he's moving around and he's pushing buttons and he can't reach this one button. So he literally jumps and hits a button. And there's some really funny things that just didn't, you didn't get to see everything with Neelix. Ethan Phillips, to his credit, is excellent at comedy, right? Whether it's physical or not, he's very good at that. So when you see him in the transporter room, the first time we see the transporter room, what's interesting about that transporter room, if you look at the ceiling, that was actually the transporter pad, the floor from Star Trek the movie. That was kind of a neat thing. We had a piece of history there that we were working with.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and just very quickly, Robbie, from a director standpoint, how is a beam out created? Just to explain to people, like when we beam people in and out, can you explain the plate processing and how that works?
Yeah, it's technically on that beaming moment, you need the person there and then you need them not there, and you sort of blend it in a dissolve with a little effect. But you don't want to always just cut to these locked off shots that feel like obviously a visual effects, shot. Mm-hmm. So what we would often do is sort of pan the camera over with the actor walking to a stop position, and then they'd start to beam out. You'd keep rolling, you'd step them out, and then you'd get the clean plate. So it looked like they were in movement, or they'd beam into that shot and then start walking into the scene. So it was always, from a directorial standpoint, you're always looking to try to have those, not always, but often trying to build it in so it feels naturally a part of the shot. And we just sort of all got used to those steps, I think, and sometimes when a guest actor would come on and have to do a beam in or a beam out, they would act like Neelix and kind of go, what am I doing? Because they hadn't done it before. But
that's true.
I think for us, we got very used to, okay, and we're going to beam out. We'll just step in, we'll step out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another thing they don't teach you at a conservatory acting school anywhere. They don't.
No.
Then we go back to the alien sickbay, and I thought it was interesting when Torres introduces herself to Kim. She pronounces it Baylana, because the rest of the show we say Balana, right? We don't really say Baylana, but she says Lana. And I thought, hey, that's different.
I thought it was hilarious that Janeway and the team, when they were in the Ocampan Underground, were riding the escalator.
Yes.
It's like, really? Maybe we shouldn't have used the escalator. It doesn't feel very futuristic.
After we leave there, we come back to the scene with Neelix in the bath, which I love because he has that whole intro where he's singing.
And he's improvising that song, which is hilarious. Yeah.
When he's like, and he's like, ba-da-ba-ba. He does this like hilarious little melody, which just quintessential Johnny Phillips there. Yeah. But this is really the only time we see Neelix topless. You know what I'm saying?
He had that
he's got that ridge.
Chest piece in the ridge right there. Yeah.
Crazy ridge. And in the whole Mr. Vulcan bit, we have this friendship that developed, and what's odd enough is that actually became a real friendship. Ethan Phillips and Tim Russ had this really odd couple friendship that they had, that nobody else really understood, but they were buddies about, for the rest of the show. We meet the Kazon Ogla, where Neelix kind of tells us that we have to go down, and it's his way of rescuing his girlfriend Kes. So we don't know that. Robbie, I mean, honestly, when I look at the Kazon, I don't look at them as threatening, mainly because of the hair. The hair bugged the crap out of me. It was this crazy matty afro that they used the pig ears that you feed to dogs, and that was painted and put inside the hair in different places. And to me, I kept thinking they should have made it more looking like, it should have looked more closer to like the Predator or something with menacing dreadlocks, but they did this crazy afro thing with the pig ears, and I never was a fan of that. But we meet Kes, we see her, the lovely Jennifer Lean, who was the youngest at the time. I was the second youngest, right? She was the baby. I think she was 18 or 19 when she booked the show.
She was very young.
Back to the transporter room. Kim and Torres in the Ocampan Underground. Let's see, sick bay with Kes and crew. That was lovely when the doctor was complaining and Janeway just deactivates him. I love that little bit, and he just kind of, this is the point where you see that he's adding his comedic side to it, because when she says, "Computer, turn off EMH," you see Bob's face, like he literally goes, like his eyes get big for a second, like, oh my God, and he disappears, which a program shouldn't be doing that, right? He should just be very, very like.
No, he brought personality to it. He definitely did.
God, he did.
I remember then after that, that whole action sequence climbing up through the tunnels to get back to the surface, and that was a very complicated action sequence. We had a big set piece with stairs that were built to collapse, and we had some stunt doubles in there. I remember some of that stuff. Yeah. I also love the fact that I'd forgotten that Tom wanted to go back and save Harry, that he did a very heroic thing. And I was happy to see that, because, again, my memory of early days of Tom was that he was a bit of a jerk. And it was nice to see him doing something redeeming and heroic right out of the gate.
But actually, you weren't going back to say you saved Harry. We all came out. You volunteered to go back and save Chakotay.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right. So Paris. My notes are Paris and Neelix go back to help Tuvok save Chakotay and Janeway, to get them out. Right. Yeah. So that was and that's where that wonderful line. You're like, isn't that some sort of Indian custom? And then Chakotay goes, "Wrong tribe," like that, which was a great line. Wrong tribe. Let's see. We are back on the bridge, sick bay, and then back on the bridge. The Kazon come to attack because they want to overtake the array, which is now the Caretaker is slowly dying. Janeway and Tuvok, let's see, they head back to the array and they talk to the Caretaker. This, to me, is because every Star Trek episode, I feel, besides the basic story that you're watching, there's always an underlying message, behind every Star Trek episode. And for me, it comes in this speech between the Caretaker and Janeway. Now, initially, I thought that I could play this audio clip. Now, because, for licensing purposes or whatever, we really don't want to tread on anybody's copyright. So I'm just going to recreate this little scene between the Caretaker and Janeway in their voices. So, "I've been searching the galaxy for a compatible biomolecular pattern. Now, in some individuals, I found cellular structures that were similar, but You've been trying to procreate? I needed someone to replace me, someone who'd understand the enormous responsibility of caring for the Ocampa. Only my offspring could do that.
Did you ever consider allowing the Okampa to care for themselves? They're children. Children have to grow up. We're explorers too. Most of the species we've encountered have overcome all kinds of adversity without a caretaker. It's the challenge of surviving on their own that helps them to evolve. Maybe your children would do better than you think.
Voyager to Janeway.
Go ahead.
That was my own voice as Kim.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Thank you. Him. That sounded totally like Harry.
Did that have a pretty good Harry impersonation? Thank you. Oh really my God. Good. But so I think really the message behind this is in this speech, in a way. You know what I'm saying? Just like sometimes you can coddle your kids forever and say I'm gonna shelter them and whatnot, but in reality, if they don't learn to live life and life's adversities you're never going to advance or evolve as a human being, right? Or mature, however you want to put it.
I think another part of that message to me was this was a brand new series in the Star Trek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And, Gene Roddenberry had been around during the TNG years. But I think the franchise was sort of looking at some growing pains, and it was also reflective of what was happening with Star Trek itself. It was expanding and growing. And in a way, Star Trek had to let go of Daddy, of Gene Roddenberry, and sort of move into some new areas, a female captain and the Delta Quadrant and new aliens. And so in a way, it was like the franchise needed to be set free to grow up a little.
Then the caretaker dies. He becomes a rock, right? He comes from the blob down to the rock. And I think that, it's interesting because basically the Prime Directive, I think, the Prime Directive is basically we can't interfere with another species development, right? We can't do anything to affect them. And I think once Chakotay kind of takes his Maquis ship and sort of like kamikazes against the Kazon ship, which then crashes into the array, which then destroys the self-destruct sequencing, which that's when Janeway said, well, I kind of screwed up. I mean, I don't want to interfere, but I've already interfered. We're already part of it. So we're going to go ahead and destroy this array just like the caretaker was going to do. And then we are up to our own to get back to Earth. So that was a big deal with a lot of fans saying like, oh my God, she went against the Prime Directive. But yes, she did. But at the same time, she did it because of what happened we kind of messed everything up in a way by being there. Oh, I have one side note here. Scott McDonald, remember the actor that was sort of like there for a lot of stuff? He looks like the actor from The Matrix. I can't remember his name, but the one that's like Mr. Anderson, that guy with the, and he was also in Lord of the Rings. That's what Scott looks like. And he was a great actor, a recurring actor for us. And so the only other thing that I was going to play an audio clip of was the final speech, which really sets us on the whole journey. And I'm going to go ahead and do that this is Janeway's speech at the very end. It comes at 1 hour, 28 minutes and 53 seconds to 1 hour, 30, 22. Get this ready.
We're alone in an uncharted part of the galaxy. We've already made some friends here and some enemies. We have no idea of the dangers we're going to face, but one thing is clear. Both crews are going to have to work together if we're to survive. That's why Commander Chakotay and I have agreed that this should be one crew, a Starfleet crew. And as the only Starfleet vessel assigned to the Delta Quadrant, we'll continue to follow our directive, to seek out new worlds and explore space. But our primary goal is clear. Even at maximum speeds, it would take 75 years to reach the Federation, but I'm not willing to settle for that. There's another entity like the caretaker out there somewhere who has the ability to get us there a lot faster. We'll be looking for her, and we'll be looking for wormholes, spatial rifts, or new technologies to help us. Somewhere along this journey, we'll find a way. We'll find a way back. Mr. Paris, set a course for home.
Yes, ma'am.
It was I, Captain, but that's okay.
I felt like
I got it screwed up on my line anyway.
Felt like a yes, ma'am moment to me. Very good.
That's good.
Well, that's the end of our scheduled recap of the supersized pilot. Typically, every week we're going to have nice, concise recap of each episode that's much shorter, but we felt like we needed to kind of dive deep into this one. So thanks for sticking with us. And for everybody that's on Patreon, stay tuned with us right now for more bonus content.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Delta Flyers. I'm your host, Garrett Wang, with my co-host, Robbie Duncan McNeill. We have Mr. Dan Curry, visual effects supervisor on Star Trek Voyager, as well as many other projects, both film and television, longtime Hollywood professional, Mr. Dan Curry. Welcome, Dan. How are you, sir?
Welcome, Dan.
Well, luckily I'm biologically functioning during this time of crisis.
How many weeks or months do you think from start of concept on that title sequence alone to finishing it, do you think there was?
It's about a month of very hard work.
A month just dedicated to kind of focusing on that, the models and the, wow.
Well, it was just doing that in addition to the other stuff.
Yeah.
There's another interesting thing about the Voyager pilot. Remember the Badlands where you had those fire tornadoes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how they came into existence were Dick Brownfield knew somebody over at Universal, and
Dick Brownfield, just to jump in, Dick Brownfield was our on-set special effects guy. So he did all the physical effects of like smoke on the set, practical effects, and then Dan Curry and his team are all visual effects. Some people,
and a lot of times we'd work together for explosions and fire, and in this case we worked together. So Dick knew this guy who was in control of the backdraft ride at Universal Studios tour, where audiences would go in and there was a special fireproof building and they would have all real fire doing all this cool stuff. So to show how people cooperate within the industry, they invited us over before the park opened and showed us how they created their fire tornadoes with little baffles and stuff. And so we went back on stage and Dick and his team recreated that. And that's what we shot against black to get those fire tornadoes.
Wow. I'm trying to remember in the very beginning of Caretaker, the pilot, early on, my character, Tom Paris, is in a shuttle with
Stoddy,
and we're flying up to Deep Space Nine, to the space station, and we look out the window and we see Voyager for the very first time. So you had two shows sort of crossing there with the reveal of Voyager and the DS9, space station. How was that moment to create?
Well, what's interesting is that none of the models are in scale with one another.
That's what I was thinking. That's why I'm asking. I bet it was you had to think about that because
there are lots of math
elements.
And you would have to design the shots so the audience wouldn't know we had limitations. But the ship that required the greatest movement would be the one that would define how much we could move the camera, because a motion control rig goes back and forth, up and down, and east-west. Yeah. And so Voyager was about 4 to 5 feet long, and Deep Space Nine was 6 feet in diameter.
Oh, yeah, so not even close to scale.
So luckily, the crew at MHG were really great at math, and we would be able to do calculations so that the camera move on Voyager was very much, and the camera move on Deep Space Nine was very little, so we could get them in scale with one another.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly why I was asking, because I imagine that those DS9 elements were built long before anybody thought about Voyager. The pilot Caretaker was huge.
One of the things about the pilot that is one of my fond memories is Marvin Rush had a very small helicopter at the time.
Yep.
And he and I went together and did the location scout in the desert.
Oh, you did?
And Marvin's helicopter was so small it had no doors.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
And he used to call it his magic carpet. And we had a wonderful day just flying, and we would land in places in the middle of these salt flats where possibly nobody had ever been before.
Wow.
And after checking out what we wanted to see on the way back, we were hungry. So we flew over a little town that was basically a gas station, a motel, and a restaurant in an intersection. So we landed nearby and went in, and the young waitresses there were very excited. They said, did you just land in that helicopter? And Marvin said, well, we heard you guys made the best hamburgers, so we flew out from LA to check them out.
Smooth, Marvin. Very smooth.
That's awesome. I talk about the fact that during the pilot episode when we filmed on El Mirage Dried Lake Bag that Marvin showed up at work in the helicopter.
Yeah,
I did not know. Yeah, he came to work
a couple of days of filming out there. Yeah. He flew out from his house back in LA because he could just fly over the mountains in an hour, or under an hour. But to drive it is 5, 6, 7 hour drive to get around all the way around.
I just had no idea, Dan, that you guys location scouted in that helicopter. That's awesome.
That's great. Some of the things we're going to put in every episode each week are going to be winners and loser prizes. Garrett will vote on his winner and his loser from each episode as we recap it, and I will vote on my winner and loser.
My winner for this episode are the Okampa. I'm going to go with those guys. Like that, literally, like without us basically saying, hey, we're going to make it really hard for us to get back home. Without us doing that and violating the Prime Directive, they pretty much would have been annihilated by the Kazon. So I think they are the big winners of this episode, as well as Neelix and Kes for getting a free ride on the USS Voyager. Those are my winners. Who's your winner?
My winner is going to be Kate Mulgrew, the actress. I think she nailed the kind of the star quality that they needed to launch a new Star Trek series. I thought she showed great emotion and compassion, like that speech from Harry Kim's mom's message. Mm-hmm. She just really nailed that episode, The Caretaker and the pilot, in a great way. So I'm going to give Kate Mulgrew the prize for my winner. Losers. What do you think? Who's your loser here?
Probably the original Doctor and the original First Officer, because they die.
That's
Sorry to Jeff and Scott, but they die.
It's funny. I was thinking along the same lines. I was going to go the Betazoid, who was flying. Stotty, who was flying this ship. She's a loser because she got killed and I got the chair.
That is true. That is true. Just a little side note. Yeah, that actress. Do you remember her name? Do you remember her name at all?
Alicia Coppola.
That's right.
She had been on MTV as a VJ or something. She had done something on MTV. I think she was kind of known for that.
Yes, and you know what's funny is she and I actually filmed an independent film outside of this. And,
oh, really?
Yep, about the same. It was going on probably like 2 years after we shot the pilot. I ended up doing something off on the side, and she was in that same film with me.
Small world.
Yeah, small world.
Our next section, that's going to be a weekly section, is our do-over section. Yep. Do-over, over.
What would you do over? What's your do-over?
If we could do something over, what would it be?
Yeah.
I was thinking about it. There's a lot of stuff. There's a number of things I think I'd like to do over, because I think I like I may have said earlier, I leaned too heavily into personally into the kind of jerk qualities of the character. I thought that's what they wanted. They sort of written it that way. I amplified it a bit. I think I would have done that tomato soup scene over. I think I was a little nervous doing it myself. It was the very first scene we shot. And I would love a shot at starting that character off just a little more relaxed and a little more, less chip on his shoulder and a little more cavalier or detached, but in a more lighthearted way than quite such a combative, got to prove himself way. I'd like a do-over on that first scene, because I think it would have led to everything else being a little more modulated. So that would be my do-over, tomato soup.
Well, I find that interesting that you just said what you just said about you. Were you really nervous before shooting that scene?
Yeah.
You had the nerves going. Okay.
I had nerves going, I think not because I had never done the acting thing before.
Right.
I think, to be quite transparent, I think at that point in my life, I had just had my second child.
Okay.
I was kind of the head of, I was the responsible financial person in a family of 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I had come off of a very quiet year. I was doing a play in New York for very little money.
Yeah.
Just had not had much work, and I was panicked. I had been panicked that year about,
that's right.
Can I provide for a second child? And I'm an actor. What the hell am I doing? And I think my nervousness, which continued through a lot of Voyager, to be honest, was this sense that I can't screw this up because I am responsible financially. I need this job. You know, it was very much about that. And so that was my nerves. It's like, I don't want to do this wrong. I want to give them what they want, make them happy, so that I keep this job. And that was my nerves were like, what about—
I remember talking to you early in our friendship, and you had talked about how it was slim pickings for you right before Voyager, and that you had actually been considering what jobs, non-Hollywood jobs, could you do to bring home the bacon for your family.
Yeah, I had started talking to an actor named Stanley DeSantis, who we have the same agent. Stanley had started a t-shirt company a year or two before Voyager. He just got the license for Forrest Gump, Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, and he thought he'd make a t-shirt with the licensing, and he started making tons of money, and he was licensing movies and things.
Oh, wow.
Turning it into merchandise. And I was going to go work with Stanley in his t-shirt business, and give, and back off of the acting, because I needed to make a living. I needed a job that I could depend on. And so that would be my do-over, is to do over that first scene, because I would have just relaxed a little more and lightened up. What about your do-over?
Gosh. I think for me, I really, really wish I could have done over that voiceover, that ADR. I got myself in such I worked myself up so much that literally in order to move on, because we had pages and pages of extra looping that I had to do, extra lines, that we just kind of said, all right, this is the best we can do. Let's move it on. And it just did not, it didn't come off well. I mean, I think that when you watch that pilot, it's a very, very it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound, it's just off, and so that's my main do-over.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Hard to do those.
Just a quick question. What was I want to know, what was your first impression when you met me? And I want to say what my first impression of you. And
the first time I met you, you were there to get a haircut.
Correct. We were between
you had long hair.
Yep.
And you were there with another actress.
Was I? Oh, I thought I was solo. Okay.
I think you were there with another actress who was very Hollywood, young Hollywood, and I never felt like I was young Hollywood. I just never was part of that scene. And you had the long hair, and you looked really cool, and the actress was there that you either knew or maybe was there with you. I don't know which. And and I just remember thinking, oh, they're super hip and cool Hollywood.
Wow.
And I am totally not that. Like I was a theater nerd from the East Coast, and
it's funny because there's only 4 years difference between us, right? We have 4 years. You're a 1964 baby. I'm 68 baby. That's it. So we're in the same, we're in the same zone here. And I remember in the beginning, I never believed that you were only 4 years older than me. I kept saying, let me look at your license. I don't believe you. Can I look at your driver's license?
I was lying that I was much older.
You're lying. You must be older because you had the kids. You had the wife, the kids.
And I was 29 when we met, right? I had two kids already.
Yep. And it was literally outside of I was walking into the hair trailer and you were coming out of it. So we were in between. It was the daylight. It was sunny. Yeah. And they said, this is Robbie McNeill. He plays Tom Paris. And I looked at you and went, oh my God, Masters of the Universe. Because that to me, as cheesy as that movie is, I loved that film. I really did. It was just something that I felt, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm meeting him,
It's an amazing, so bad that it's so good movie from the 80s. It captures so many things about the 80s. Yeah.
Very, very true. And then one other final note that I didn't get to talk about is in that final Janeway speech, when she addresses both crews.
Yeah.
The music, the orchestral, the music that you hear behind there, it's Voyager themey, but right in the very center, you hear the Star Trek familiar melody. You hear the little Star Trek jingle in there incorporated to that. And I thought, wow, that was seamless. They really did a good job with that.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that point in there.
Yeah. Great. Our last game, we're going to do some fan reviews of this episode.
Excellent.
We deep into the intraweb and found some fan reviews. So I'll kick it off. We've got a review from Jamal E. He says, why does Janeway decide to destroy the array, sacrificing the only reasonable way home based solely on the caretaker's wishes? Tuvok is quick to point out that this is a prime directive issue. It's clear, he says, that it's not up to Voyager to see that the Ocampa are safeguarded from the Kazon. So why does Janeway decide to interpret the prime directive in some other way? She says something like, we didn't ask to be involved, but we are. This line is weak and vague. It really doesn't mean anything if you think about it. Yet Janeway destroys the array, makes enemies with the Kazon because the Ocampa need to be protected. It's very noble, but it's hard to understand based on everything Star Trek lore says about the Prime Directive. I would have no problem with it if the writers would have found a better way of explaining it. Instead, it seems very much like an arbitrary decision. That's Jamal's review. What do you think?
I think he's absolutely right. But without that decision, we would not have a show. I mean, part of the thing is we have to be stranded 70,000 light years from Earth. And we did touch upon this a little bit earlier. We did talk about this. So
you got one over there?
Yep, I do. From Not Marshall, which is at MSUTH, M Southern on Twitter. I want to know why Tom Paris didn't play his earlier character who got in trouble with Wesley. If y'all could discuss that, that would be great.
What I heard is the reason, and it actually makes sense to me, is that in the Writers Guild, the union for writers, when a writer creates a character in one episode, if that character comes back for other episodes, they have to pay that original writer every time that character appears, a character fee.
Oh.
And the writer, whoever wrote the first Duty, I don't know which writer it was, I should know that, but if they had brought Nick Locarno onto Voyager, they would have had to pay that writer every episode a character fee, and I don't think they wanted to do that. I also think they wanted to have a little bit of a cleaner slate so that they could create whatever history they wanted and not be tied to anything. So
I didn't know that. Okay, there you go. That's
all right.
You have another one?
I've got one more.
Okay.
This is from Juliet H. She says, corny farm sequences aside, this is an action-packed hour and a half that introduces a diverse and interesting group of characters with plenty of potential. Best of all, with Voyager stuck on the wrong side of the galaxy, every planet is new and every situation unknown. Space is, for the first time since the original series, a real frontier, wild, lawless, unexplored. And that is a very promising start for a new show. Thank you, Juliet H. I like that review. That's how I felt.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, that we are probably one of the most diverse cast. If you think about it, we have the half Latino, half human Latino, and half Klingon in B'Elanna Torres. We have a Native American, even though Robert Beltran is Mexican American. And there's been many times fans have come up to me that are actually, Native, and they say, he's not Native. And I said, okay, well, he's not, but it's at least there's representation. Be happy about that, is what I was trying to say. Yeah. And so we did have a lot, and having an Asian character such as myself, and having a Vulcan that is not your standard Vulcan.
Female captain, a lot of kind of blazing new trails, I think, on our show.
Yet, did you know this, Robbie? After we premiered Caretaker, which was January 16th, 1995 on a Monday, the Voyager production office voicemail was full of messages on Tuesday. And all the messages pretty much said the same thing. And they were, how dare you allow a woman to be in command?
Yeah.
How, and then another one was like, guess what? We are coming down to Paramount Studios and we are going to blow up your sound stages and kill you for allowing a woman to lead the show.
Yeah. Some people are very, very upset about it.
Very angry.
Yeah.
Very angry. And this, and these aren't Trek fans. These are people that were channel surfing and they came across this and said, oh, you know what? And it just goes to show you, with this puritanical background of how this country was formed, there's a lot of very conservative people that can't, they're not down with that, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's a little sad because every major country in the world has had a female leader, and the U.S. hasn't had that yet.
Not yet.
They weren't happy about Janeway either, right?
Yeah.
My final question is from Lee Bell at Ford Cougar 7 on Twitter. What was it like filming on the collapsing metal staircase on the Ocampan planet? How was it filming on the DS9 set in Quark's bar? So, Robbie, how was it filming on the collapsing staircase?
It was exciting. I always loved stunts as an actor, although I was very comfortable saying to a stuntman, take this if, there was explosions or fights that were beyond my capabilities. But that was fun. I enjoyed that collapsing staircase. The special effects guys were great at resetting it. It was built to do exactly what it did. And it was a lot of fun.
So no mishaps, nobody got injured, everything was good. Okay.
No, everything was good.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And the second part of Lee's question, how was it filming on the DS9 set in Quark's bar? Robbie, do you want to take that one at all?
I thought it was great. I mean, I didn't know DS9. I hadn't watched the show, so I wasn't familiar with the set. It felt very authentic for what we were trying to say, or on a space station. Yeah, it was fun.
And for me,
colorful. Very different than our set. Very different than I had already walked on some of our sets and we'd shot in the mess hall. So very different feel, which I thought was appropriate.
Yeah, the look of it, the color scheme of it was completely different from Voyager. And also for me being the sweater of Voyager, that was a nice, cool set that hadn't been filmed on. So when we walked on there, I felt, it's air conditioned. I'm not dying on this one. So that was one positive for me, being the sweater. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. Most of all, I want to thank Rebecca Sims and my partner and
Megan Elise, my partner.
Elise. Yeah. They have worked so hard. I just want to acknowledge how hard they've worked to help us put this all together and get logo designs and music and editing and t-shirt design inspirations, and just really been supportive. So Rebecca and Megan, thank you so much.
Yes. I mean, literally tirelessly. They have been just around the clock doing all the nitty gritty while we're trying to prep for the show. They're doing everything in the behind the scenes. And I'll tell you, starting a podcast there's a lot of stuff that goes on with this. It's not that simple. I thought it would be very easy, but oh my gosh, there's so many logistics and so many things to take care of and set up. And
we've got some growing pains. This was, like we said, unexpected, supersized, but we wanted to dig in deep for this first episode and maybe give everybody a little extra something. So thanks to Megan and Rebecca. Thanks to all our Patreon subscribers, and particularly our producer level subscribers and our co-executive producer level subscribers. It really helps to make this show possible and get all of those things together that allow us to bring these shows to you.
And for as long as we have spent on this, I do think this is a good beginning, and I think that people will dive into this and be excited that we did do as much as we did do. Thank you again to all the fans, and thank you to both Rebecca and Megan for helping out with everything. And we look forward to you joining us on this journey for our next episode that we will be reviewing Parallax.